Welcome everyone, my name is Piper Bull and I'm a graduate student at Florida State University, pursuing a master's degree with a specialization in real estate. I hold an undergrad degree from Florida State University in real estate. It is my honor to welcome you to the If I Were 21 series, organized by the FSU Real Estate Center. This series invites executives from across the nation to discuss their career paths and market conditions, and to offer their advice to students. Before I introduce today's guest, I'd like to welcome all who are able to join us from other universities across the nation. It is a pleasure to have you here with us. Please note that time has been set aside to respond to your questions. So if you have a question, please send it to us at any time using this chat feature at the bottom of your screen. We will monitor this and try to address your questions later in the discussion. Today's discussion features a one-on-one conversation with Mary Ludkin. Dr. Ludkin is a senior managing director and head of global research for Heitman, headquartered in Chicago. Heitman is a global real estate investment management firm with more than $40 billion in assets under management. Founded in 1966, Heitman has 10 offices worldwide and is active across the world in private equity, private debt, and public equity markets. Dr. Ludkin is a member of the firm's board of managers, its global management committee, its North American private equity valuation committee, and its private equity and debt investments committee. Among her many appointments, she recently served as a trustee on the Urban Land Institute's global board of directors and currently serves on the board of ULI's Center for Sustainability and Economic Performance. She is an industry pillar. We are absolutely honored she was able to take time out of her busy schedule to join us today. Leading today's discussion, we are fortunate to have with us John Crossman. Mr. Crossman, the founder and owner of Crossman Career Builders, is a nationally recognized executive, writer, and speaker, and a passionate advocate for the minority cause and student success. Among his many business and community activities, Mr. Crossman formerly served as CEO of Crossman and Company, a leading real estate company headquartered in Orlando, Florida. Please welcome Mr. John Crossman.
Muted. All right, hang on. There we go. Oh my gosh, little technical difficulty. Can you hear me okay, Piper? Good, okay. And Mary, can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
Good, or I'm sorry, Dr. Mary. Is I probably
whatever you'd like to call me, John. It's
Your
fine.
Excellency, Madam. So, Mary, first thing I want to talk to you about, and I know I'm just going to talk about the elephant in the room. Halloween's coming up, and you know it's a scary time. And I love scary movies. Do you like scary movies, Mary?
I like more the Hitchcock than the horror side.
More the suspense type.
Yeah.
The birds and stuff like that.
Right on.
No, I'm down with that. I got much respect for that. It's very cool. A friend of mine gave me this article, and they did a scientific thing about, scientifically, what's the scariest movie ever made? Isn't that interesting? And they did it based on heart rate. What was the most scary thing? So, do you have any idea? Guess what was number one? Any idea?
Psycho?
Psycho was not in the top 35.
No kidding.
Yeah, The Omen was 32. That would probably be, one from closer to the era. But number one was Sinister. And what I know, right? So here's what's funny is I love horror movies. I've seen all of them. And so my friend that gave this to me, kept pointing to it and say, what's the plot of that movie? And I'd say, oh, well, that's where these women, and one of them's having an affair with other one's husbands. They go down to a cave and they get lost. And then vampire people, bat people start attacking them. That's essentially the plot. So I kept going through all these plots of these movies, and they're all kind of crazy. But what it got me thinking about is a fear. We all have different things that we're scared about. And so you're a researcher. And so as we go into this today, we got a lot of students listening in, and they have a lot of fears, right? They have a lot of things that they're concerned about. We've had 2020 has been a weird year of fear, hasn't it been? With all the different uniqueness,
sure,
right? Uncertainty. So what I want to do is sort of as we go through and talk, I want us to do the best we can of helping alleviate fear from these students,
What a great idea.
Right. So when my daughters were young and they would be scared of something, I always tell them that the way we beat fear is by knowledge, right? We get information. That's how we can kind of eliminate it. So anyway, so the first thing I want to talk about with you is you are super smart and you've got lots of degrees, and some of these students are getting their bachelor's degree. and they're thinking about should they go to grad school. That's a very common thing for kids to think about. And so one of the first things to talk about, because you have such a strong academic background, what do you think as far as why should a student go to grad school? Like what would the traits be? Or why should they not go to grad school? And how do you see that coming out in careers? Can you talk about that first?
I'd be happy to. First up, I was a political science major. I studied Russian literature, philosophy, right? I'm in the unemployable immediately out of college category. So if you've done my path, you may have trouble getting a job, in which case an advanced degree might be a way in. My first advanced degree, I got a master's degree in teaching. I taught 5-year-olds for 9 months right out of college, and would have been on a path to getting a teaching position when something else intervened that we can talk about if you find it fitting. So I was trying to get my way into an interesting career by graduate school. If you all have an interesting way into your career, if you were real estate majors, for instance, there are firms that will hire you as an analyst in their acquisitions group, as somebody to underwrite debt investments. It will be harder if you're graduating in June into a pandemic, because we're still likely going to have a pandemic by then. Will be a little harder, but I would try the route of work experience first. That can then help guide you in what you choose to do if you go on to get a graduate degree. Because work experience is going to tell you what you like and what you don't like. It'll show up what the gaps are in your background versus where you're already strong. And that can allow you to be focused in how you use graduate school.
Gotcha. If somebody's on this call, maybe they're not at FSU, they're at a different university, and they're getting a bachelor's degree in something, but they've learned later on, man, I really do want to get it into real estate. So should they look at maybe getting a master's in real estate? Like if they're kind of more filling out that path, going to grad school in that context, is that helpful?
It sure can. They can look at what coursework they already have where they feel that they've dominated something and then try to fill in the gaps. So somebody that did real estate as an undergrad may say, hey, I need to do more finance. I want to understand. I want to structure deals. Or maybe they go a route that involves negotiation skills. I'm a words person in a numbers business. So they may want to think about what their skills are that can allow them to stand out in a specific field.
Right. So in a specific way, adding a skill set, like no, go to grad school, just go to grad school. It's like, I'm going to add this skill set because it's a step.
Yes.
Are there, you kind of touched on this. Are there scenarios that you don't recommend grad school to people?
It's expensive. So don't do it. If you don't really want to be a lawyer, don't go to law school. Right. If you don't really want to teach, don't do a PhD. I'm one of the few. After my undergraduate political science degree, I got a PhD in political science. My mother asked me if I would be driving a cab at the end because she had no idea how this was going to work out. I didn't either. Somebody else was paying for it. I happened to love school. It worked out really well for me. I can't guarantee my path would work for anyone else because there were lots of flying turns during it. Well, I can't remember now your question, John, but I hope I answered it.
No, you did. And I think one of the things, and you and I have talked about this, is that I'm dyslexic. And so I have a lot of respect for traditional academia, but I honestly couldn't do it. I couldn't go your path. But so your and my paths are different, but we've both been successful, right?
Yes.
And so the point, I think what I hear you saying is like, go to grad school if you have a specific plan and it economically makes sense. Don't feel like this pressure that everyone has to go to grad school. You don't. Yes. It can benefit, but you've really got to do some research homework. And if you're not really sure, go ahead and try to get in the work world, get some experience, and then you can figure that out.
John, if I could add one thing to that, think about a perfect day. If your perfect day involves being outside, being in an airplane, being in a car, simultaneously looking out the window and listening to somebody else and taking notes at the same time, then real estate might be for you. If you really don't want to be outside, you don't like other people, think about that and figure out where it is that perfect day can unfold for you.
I like that. I like that. So the kind of visual of what's a perfect day to somebody and then kind of connecting that all together. That's
Yep.
really helpful. That's really helpful. So I want to switch gears to something else. So a lot of times we think about fears, college students and fears. My youngest daughter, one time when she was really young, she said, "Dad, are you afraid of anything?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "What?" And I said, "Spiders, clowns, clowns with spiders in their pockets. Those are the three things I'm scared of. I don't like those things." So one of the things that students are really scared of is networking, right? Like networking and relationship development. That's something that can be kind of hard, right?
Yeah.
And so I tell all students at every university, if you're interested in getting real estate while you're a student, join ULI, NAIOP, and ICSC. I always tell them to do that and try to get involved. Now, what I will tell the students is, because it's kind of interesting, when you want to become a full member of ULI, you have to have people that nominate you and approve you. When you go beyond that, you want to get onto a council. Oh my gosh, you got to be nominated and approved. And I mean, for me, after like 20 years experience, I had it like I was trying to get in some secret cult or something like that to try to get into it. Now I'm in a council, right? So I say all the students to say that, here comes Mary, and Mary's like a ULI trustee. I mean, this is like I mean, that is like the top. So what I want you to touch on is like, you clearly must, I guess you value networking, things like that. But can you talk to that for the students? Like, why is it so important to network and get involved in things like ULI?
Oh, thanks for that. Mine is an odd path in that I did a lot of other things before I chose ULI. I actually spoke at ULI conferences long before I became a member. But I did do other industry groups along the way, in part because of what happens in the halls outside the conference sessions, where you can meet your peers and somebody tells you, if you're a researcher, you're always concerned about databases. I know it sounds arcane, but hallway conversations in which somebody told me of a new economic forecasting service were as valuable as anything else that happened in the meeting. And meeting those friends that are perhaps competitors, but building the linkages that allow you to call them when you've got a question and that they'll be willing to call you when they have a question, those are invaluable. It helps that I'm an extrovert. I like people. Other people bring me energy. And I figured out long ago what you know, John, which is everybody's scared. They walk into a room where they know no one. Mm-hmm. And you learn your skills where you can walk into a group, you just walk over to that group of 5 people with their backs to you, you wedge yourself in, you put a smile on your face and you say, "Hi, I'm Mary Ludgin. I'm from Chicago. What's your name?" I've learned those skills and I've learned what I say next when they tell me where they're from. I've got something in my brain about, they've told me they're from Tallahassee. I've got something I can say with regards to Tallahassee. Just learn those basic blocking and tackling skills. And that scary 5,000 people, no one becomes, whoa, this is easy. I can do this.
That's so great. What's funny about me, Mary, is I'm actually an introvert. People are surprised about that. No, but it's true in that I've really learned these skills. Like I've learned how to do it. But in my natural state, I just want to blind my pianos and, watch scary movies all weekend. That's what I want to do. I don't naturally, whereas like my wife, my daughter, they're more charging. They need that energy. Jim Senef and I've had this big conversation about that. But once you know that about yourself, like if you're more of an introvert, it's like you have a battery that kind of slowly dies. So what I know is if I go to a networking thing, I go to a point and then I stop because I'm at my best at a certain level.
Yes.
And so
even I do that as an extrovert. I just hit pause.
And so whether you're like me or like you can learn the skill set. It's just a skill set to learn, but you got to practice it.
Yes.
Right? Got it.
And the key to it, just one thing, listening. Listen to what somebody just said to you and figure out what in it you can ask about as a follow-up. The greatest gift you can give to someone else is an interest in what they say, and that will reap benefits. They think of you differently because you didn't just turn the conversation to yourself with the second response. Turn it to them again, and they'll like you.
Right. And so that they were like, "Oh my gosh, Chicago, man, that's a beautiful city," like that kind of thing. It's picking up on that and adding to it. And so in this world of COVID, some of these students won't get a chance to like network and what you would say traditionally, But can't they, like, maybe if they're on campus, just challenge themselves to go walk up to 5 students they never met before and practice? Or couldn't they practice in the grocery store, just checking out with the cashier, practicing those skills wherever they are? Is that true?
Great idea. Absolutely. COVID makes it harder. You might have to do it on Zoom, right? Figure out how it is that you jump into a conversation on Zoom, because that will be our life for the next, call it 9 months, I'm suspecting. But yeah, use your opportunities to try it.
I with my daughters, always tell them my goal every time we check out at Publix is to make the cashier laugh. And so I'm always like, how can I come up with a different joke? Like I turn to them and say, I'm not buying you cigarettes again. Don't ask it, this time. I'll say something like that just to kind of, but I'm trying to get them, it's the same way, is that get away from the phones and having human connectivity. And you're saying that that's just super important. Even if you're a researching nerd, right? I mean, you still have to do that.
Maybe especially if you're a researching nerd, right?
Yeah,
People
cool.
know I have a PhD. They assume I'm judgmental and difficult to talk with. I want to dispel that right away.
That's interesting. That's a good point. That I would imagine to a lot of people, you're very intimidating, particularly if they've just read about you, and then when they meet you, and so that about yourself, and then you kind of adjust your demeanor so that they don't get intimidated. Is that what you're saying?
It helps that I'm 5'2" and shrinking, because I don't have the physical presence. But you're right. I did learn at some point that you can be intimidating even when you don't think you are.
Yeah, because sometimes there are people responding to the brand kind of a thing. So I got
Yes.
that. Now, something else that you said in all that, so much wisdom. Thank you. You said you were a speaker before you were at the conference. So let me ask you this. Is having public speaking skills a good thing for business development? Is that a thing?
Oh, do it.
Yeah.
So I always tell my boss, who was a baseball player in high school, and I think on into college, right? That's what he did. My era, women, Title IX had come through, but it wasn't making a difference at Wheaton Central High School, that's for sure. I competed on the speech team, a complete pointy-headed, nerdy thing. I had no idea that was going to be valuable. But every day I am speaking, I am trying to persuade, I am doing something. And I do it more easily because I thought about public speaking, and I've been doing it for 40 years right now. If you haven't had a chance, if your classes in college and university were large and there weren't many instances where you were being asked for your opinion about something, a response to the reading, find a setting, join Toastmasters, find a setting in which you can present your opinion and you can learn from others as to how to do it. So many people fail at it.
Being an established public speaker, has it advanced your career?
Oh, for God's sake. And if you're a woman, there is an effort to expand the diversity in our industry, that of real estate, on many dimensions. There is so much demand for diverse speakers on anything. So you've got this, if you're a woman, you have this gigantic opportunity. If you're frightened of it, I get it. Public speaking's in the top 10 things that people are frightened of, but you can conquer it.
It's number one. Yeah.
You can conquer it.
It's number one for Americans over death. So most people would rather be in the coffin than give the eulogy, which is sort of funny to me.
Absolutely.
My high school speech teacher sadly passed away this summer, and his widow and I just established a scholarship at FSU in his memory. And then we're trying to promote when that fund. And so we're trying to promote that. But I always tell people that I have a similar story to you, in that when I took that, learned public speaking, very, very helpful. I'm going to ask this as an obvious question, but I just want to say it. Has being an established public speaker helped you make more money?
Yes, it absolutely has.
Okay.
It may be indirect in that it helped me become a trustee. It helped me get visibility, and that is meaningful to my firm. So it's not direct, but it's indirect.
Yeah, I think that there's so few people that even want to speak. Like there's not a big rush. And
Yes.
so if people just know you'll say yes, it's kind of all the time. And I would imagine for these students listening in, if they were like, well, gosh, you got to practice. How you get practice? You get practice by volunteering. Like if you're in a fraternity, sorority, find a way to give them a speech. If you're, wherever you are, find opportunities to just speak and just get more practice at it. Just a skill.
And that goes to your suggestion regarding NAOP, ICSC, ULI. Their young leader portions of those where you can have public speaking opportunities within a group of 20 to 25-year-olds. It's maybe a less threatening setting, maybe a more threatening setting, but there are lots of opportunities for exhibiting leadership and public speaking skills.
All right, so I want to go on to my next topic, and remember my theme is fear, okay? So my question is, what is Hype Man? Hype Man, what is Hype Man? So can you just tell us about your company and then what you do there? Would you mind? That was funny. Come on, Hype Man, get that fine.
I smiled. Wasn't that enough?
Yeah, it was good. It's good.
Yeah, I get it. I see why you like to speak. Because in fact, the audience can give you that wonderful gratification.
Yes, thank you. All right.
Yes, I understand. So Heitman is a real estate investment advisory firm. When I was in college, I had no idea such things existed. In fact, for much of graduate school, I had no idea. But we run money. We invest money in real estate. Real estate's all we do. And we invest it on behalf of the Florida State Pension, I've now said it wrong, the State Board of Florida. I've now said it wrong twice, but I think I'm done with that. The Illinois State Teachers Retirement System, the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Korea. They are clients of our firm. And they invest in real estate as part of how they diversify their portfolio of investments today to pay liabilities, pension responsibilities as teachers retire. And real estate is all we do. We invest in the debt side of real estate. So we make loans with our clients' capital. We invest in private equity real estate. We own apartment buildings in downtown Chicago, student housing in Melbourne, Australia, self-storage on 4 continents. And then finally, there is a REIT portion of what we do. So we have investment capital in real estate investment trusts, listed versions of real estate companies.
Gotcha. So if I'm a college student, and this is kind of going over my head, a kind of a simple way to think about it is that if somebody is working at a company and they're putting a little bit of money away each month into their 401k or whatever, and of course, if there's thousands or millions of people doing that, all that money's in this one group. And so companies like yours help take that money and invest it in real estate so that they're getting their returns, right? Yeah. So it's all about institutional investing of money, so people get a return on that. And so, you know, and I'm assuming now let's talk about what you do there. And so what you do there is so important because it's the research side of it, right? So, you know, somebody could say, hey, let's just buy this or that, but how do we know which product type is going to be doing better or worse? So is that kind of what your world is? It sounds really important.
It absolutely is. We're making judgment calls of, is Asia, because it's done better on COVID, is Asia the place to put more money for the global investor? We have investors that are solely focused on the US. Is the senior housing sector, which has been hit hard by COVID, is that the smart place to go right now? There's a contrarian theme that tends to work in real estate investment. You look at the hardest hit sectors and you say, perhaps the risk in this sector is being mispriced. You also look back at prior recessions and try to glean insights that will, we hope, play out as the recession ends come next summer, actionable investment. We also try to look at what's changed. I'm in my office today, but I would tell you at this moment, about 25% of my firm is in the office. Their entire tenants within this 1 million square foot office building in downtown Chicago that aren't here. What does it mean that Facebook, tenant in this building, is not in residence? What will that mean for the long-term demand for office? So we get to think short-term and we get to think medium-term and long-term about what are smart ways to deploy capital.
Does that ever get intimidating to you to think about, lots of people would want to grab you and say, hey, Mary, where do I put this money? And then you have that responsibility because, you know, I would imagine like, even now, like if you start talking, you're like, hey, everybody, you know, this area of the market's going to look for, that influences people, right?
Yes.
So tell me about that aspect of that. How's that feel?
Well, that's the 3 a.m. wake up call, right? That's the whoa, holy moly. And there are certainly moments when it's a little overwhelming. When trying to think through something as complex as COVID and what of this 7 months that we've spent in not quite lockdown, but what of that will be lasting and what of it's going to go away? In the same way that after 9/11, we were trying to figure out, what did 9/11 mean for New York City? What did it mean for were office buildings targets as opposed to being places where people worked? We can look back on the what was smart in what people forecasted then versus what was stupid in hindsight, and try to apply that to right now. A lot of what I have said in writing will come back looking naive. Know that and deal with it. If I get a little bit wrong, that shouldn't be the end of it. At least that's how my firm has behaved, luckily. But it can be worrisome. If you don't like that kind of worry, don't become a researcher, because we're helping to guide investment decisions all the time. Don't become an acquisitions person, because that's just too much. Maybe you want to go toward the reporting side in real estate if you've got accounting skills. There you're making fewer judgment calls. There's something more structured. Think about who you are, what makes you excited, and what makes you horrified. And of course, play to the excited part.
Yeah, that's such great advice. Bridget O'Connor is our chair for this whole conference. If you've met Bridget, Bridget's with Publix, and so she leads a team, and in her team they pick sites, and that sounds cool and exciting as long as the sites turn out well, right? So that's another aspect what you're talking about. I think that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm so pleased you brought up Publix, because Publix has navigated so many things well. I know best the last 15, 20 years. They've just been so smart in providing service to grocery store patrons, and they are a standout firm in an environment that is so complex. How do you compete with Target, that is more in the grocery business? How do you compete with Amazon, that for some reason wants to get into the grocery business big time? And Publix has navigated it brilliantly.
Yeah, what a great job. It's I think for some of our students on this call, I would imagine with some of them, they've experienced jobs, not careers. And so when we think about that, if you're working a job and you're getting paid $10 an hour and your shift ends, you leave and you don't think anything about it. And you might look at what you're making, and then you hear about somebody who's making $150,000 a year or $250,000 a year, and you think, oh my gosh, and all that great money. But what they don't understand is that, dude, it is a career and not a job. And so I just thought, like when you have a job, you don't wake up at 3 a.m. thinking about something, and you're not going to get asked about a decision you made 5 years earlier.
Yes.
But those are really good points. Like if you write a report and then later on somebody asks a question about it, that's a big deal. It's a big deal. And so Absolutely. That's good for people to understand. Like heavy weighs the crown. You get higher up and you make more money, but you have big responsibilities. One last quick thing, and then we're going to go to our student questions. Before we jump into that, Dr. Mary. Do you have any advice for students? Do you have anything like just right on the top of your head? You're like, John, I really want these young people to know blank. Is there anything you want to make sure you put out there?
I guess I would suggest do a reassessment once a year. Decide if you like where you are. This is, of course, assuming that you're already in the job world, and I'm leaping over a vast gaping hole that may be worrying you. I don't have great advice about getting that first job, but work to get that first job. Once you're there, do an assessment once a year. Nobody wants to wake up screaming at 45 and saying, I did it wrong. And then make a course correction, recognizing that you're far more willing, people are far more willing and able to go back into school, fill in their gaps before the age of 40. After that, it's just plain harder. So do really regular assessments of yourself and the direction your career is going, and make a decision.
I love that. I love that. Mary, you're so smart. Everything you've said is so smart, helpful. And all of my fears are dissipating because I'm thinking about all this. Last thing, just with that, before we go to you, Piper, Mary, it's so helpful. And, I do want the students to know that your advice was on point, and to the part that you said there was that little gap you weren't talking about, like right here, right now. The students need to know, hey, you have me, you have Dean, you have Bridget. We have lots and lots and lots of people that will help you through the next 6 to 18 months. And so do everything that Mary said, plus you have all of us to lean on as well. So with that in mind, thank you. Piper, hit it. Ask us some of these student questions for us, okay?
First off, thank you, Mary Ludkin, for the great discussion. That was awesome to be able to listen into. We have a question from Carly. As a student of a smaller leasing position here in Tallahassee with the certainty of a promotion to assistant property manager upon graduation, would you suggest staying in this small role for a few years or starting out fresh at a different job at a bigger corporation with a better chance at more money?
Oh, okay.
I'm happy to help.
First,
I'm happy to help on that, unless you want to take it. Just
I'll give. How about 30 seconds from me and then more from you?
Sure.
I would say you're in a place where your skill set has been acknowledged. You're being offered a promotion. Take it. You're getting on the ground experience that is so valuable. Whatever you choose to do next, I would take advantage of working within a firm that knows and loves you already. Run that as far as you can. It could mean that you're their CEO in 20 years, but it could mean that in 3 years you say, okay, I've done what I could. Now I'm going to go to the larger firm.
I agree with all that. The only thing I would add is that would give some thought to geography, right? So if you're talking about the difference between Tallahassee and Chicago, right? Like if your dream is actually more to be in Chicago, I wouldn't do the little job in Tallahassee. I would get to Chicago. So I think that Mary's point is 100% on. Add into it, make sure that your geographic decision lines up with that. Is that fair? Is that good?
Sounds good.
All right.
Building off the geographic locations, which property types or geographic areas is money flowing today, or how do you see this playing out over the next year?
Thank you, Piper. Globally and within the U.S., logistics, also known as industrial, is the hot property type, in part because of what's happening as we shop differently. We've shopped differently for years. We're shopping differently in COVID, and there's a premise that we're going to get more online, more of our goods delivered to us online in the future. The logistics is big. In addition, data centers, all those clicks are going through a data center somewhere. These are the hot property types. As a result, I'm going to use a cliche from our business, they are priced to perfection. And I'm not certain they're always fully accounting for what really happens in a recession, because we're not only in a pandemic, we're in a recession. And little firms that support retailers that are dying on the vine, they're going to see a pullback in their demand. You can't assume that every lease is going to pay out in the logistics. So what we're doing, some of, in addition to investing in logistics and industrial, we're trying to look at the beaten up property types, places like student housing, where there were questions about how many people were going to actually need those purpose-built student housing units that their parents are paying for. How many people are going to stay full-time in college? So there have been questions about that sector. And there may be some investment opportunities that come out of people getting cold feet over a sector that we think makes sense on the long basis.
Great,
Awesome.
that's awesome.
Thank you. We have another question from Spencer. How would you go about a switch from commercial brokerage to asset management / acquisitions? Work
your network. You should be a member of ULI or NAOP, for example, and chat up the asset managers that are part of that, because personal connections are the way in. Try to develop pattern for those interactions that relates to the insights that your work is giving you. A lot of people don't see the forest for the trees. You got to make sure that when you say something to these people that you're chatting up, you have something of value to say to them that shows the kind of insights that you would then apply to a job as an acquisitions person or an asset manager. So take advantage of those moments.
That's great advice.
Mary, you're definitely a role model to a lot of the women in this Zoom call today and male alike, but what's some struggles or some strengths to being a woman in a very male-dominated industry?
Deep breath. Be ready for being talked over, being ignored, being treated, being asked to take notes. I've done it with good humor, recognizing that people don't change overnight. I know there's some objection to that. It just happens to be how I've done it. I've recognized that I've got my opportunity I can play for the long game, Don't be offended by unintentional slights. Don't get derailed by that. And take full advantage of the fact that our lesser numbers make us more valuable, and that women often bring a different perspective in the conversation. Don't overplay it, but we often are the team builders. We may be more empathetic. Play on your strengths, and don't be thrown off by the occasional.
Awesome. As forbearances end and CMBS delinquency rates skyrocket, specifically in retail and lodging, how are institutional investors mitigating the risk in these sectors?